It is a warplane light years ahead in its design, a supersonic killing machine built to become the stealth fighter of the 21st century. Packing a deadly array of state-of-the-art missile systems, it excels at both close-in dogfighting and precision strike ground attacks. Invisible to enemy radar, it can intercept and strike any target without warning. America's newest superweapon, the FA-22 Raptor, next on Modern Marvels. (1981). In his first press conference as President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan offered a deal to the Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. If Soviet SS-20 missiles aimed at Western Europe were removed, America would not deploy its Pershing II cruise missiles to counter the threat.
Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the Soviets developed different missiles to attack in different altitude bands. You couldn't fly under the missile threat. You couldn't fly over the missile threat. You had to deal with the missile threat. One way to do that is to make suppression of enemy air defense, that is, destroying the missile sites and the radars, the most important mission for the Air Force.
By the 1970s, air dominance had re-emerged as a top priority, and the U.S. Air Force committed to building its first pure air superiority fighter, an aircraft that would eventually become the F-15 Eagle. But just as F-15s became operational in 1978, alarming new evidence suggested that the new fighter's superiority might only be temporary. U.S. reconnaissance satellites passing over a Soviet flight test center north of Moscow discovered new Soviet fighters being tested. One was the agile fighter, the Mikoyan MiG-29. But the other came as a huge shock to Western analysts. It was bigger than the F-15 and far bigger than any previous Soviet-built fighter, the Sukhoi T-10 prototype.
At that time, the Soviet Union initiated some very aggressive programs to come up with counters. And both Mikoyan and Sukhoi, both those design bureaus, initiated new aircraft development efforts. And it appeared that they were on a track that would field some very advanced fighters.
If the MiG-29 had concerned the American military establishment, the existence of the Sukhoi T-10 set alarm bells ringing.
These are very good aircraft. They're aircraft that play in the same league as some of the top NATO aircraft, like Phantom, and ultimately like F-15.
The goal is world peace.
Just weeks into his first term, America's 40th president increased U.S. defense spending by $32.5 billion and began the rearmament of the United States on a colossal scale. In 1981, the Cold War was getting very warm. As Reagan and Brezhnev squared off, the U.S. Air Force concluded that it urgently needed a replacement for its F-15, an advanced tactical fighter, or ATF, that would have no equal.
As American planners start to develop the concept of air-land battle to fight World War III, the U.S. Air Force starts to think about the kind of equipment it wants to have when it comes time to fight the war.
At that time, in the secretive black world of advanced military aviation development, one technology had emerged at the forefront: stealth.
During that period, the late 1970s, of course, in what we call the black world, in the world of secret programs, there was a great effort going on to come up with counters to these new Soviet weapon systems that could enable us to knock out their SAM system. And that, of course, led to the development of the F-117.
Analysis of air-to-air combat in Vietnam, called the Red Baron Study, had kick-started the race for stealth.
An operational analysis study showed that in Vietnam, that most aircraft were killed by other aircraft that they hadn't seen. So from this, you get the idea that if the aircraft isn't seen, it has a tremendous advantage.
Air combat data from World War II and Korea reinforced this need for invisibility.
So from this, in a process of operational analysis, the U.S. Air Force learns that what you really need to do is be invisible to the enemy. And that means that an aircraft is designed to be as near as possible invisible to an enemy fighter aircraft.